was reported at the weekend that they are considering something of a reverse, not a complete one, but a partial one. So that obviously becomes the focus of more conversation than some of the other elements that you mentioned. But speaking of reform, I've only got four stories. First day back since they did so well in those council elections and the by-election. And so far, I've only got four stories that you might describe as ploddingly predictable examples of embarrassment. Only four. You'd have thought on day one there'd be 40, wouldn't you? Maybe Nigel's turned a corner and he no longer presides over a ragtag bunch of weirdos and incompetents. But I've got four. There may be more. I wonder if you can guess what they are. You just heard one of them at the end there of Nick's show. The idea that you shouldn't be able to fly a Kentish flag in Kent or a Ukrainian flag, even if you're welcoming Ukrainian refugees into your area. You can't have a flag down. I don't know. Maybe they know what they're doing. Maybe that does appeal to a particular constituency of people. I do not know, but I do know this. Labour have got a few problems on the table at the moment, and one of the most easy to address would be a revision of sorts of the winter fuel allowance. Now, we spoke about it quite a lot on the programme, and I think it's fair to say that we felt it was too blunt an instrument. Is that fair? I think we felt it was too blunt an instrument, as it kind of played a zero-sum game, apart from a relatively small group of people who would become eligible for it. And then there was something of a bonus, if you like, for want of a better word, among people who didn't realise that they would be eligible, not just for the winter fuel allowance, but also for other benefits if they went to the trouble of applying for it. And the idea that would soften the blow hasn't seemed to touch the sides. The threshold at the moment, and this is what I want to talk about, the threshold at the moment is £11,500. So if you are getting by on £11,500 or less, or if you're getting by on less than that sum, you will receive the winter fuel allowance. If you are getting by on more than that sum, you will not. I don't quite know what question to ask you this morning, because I don't think there's much, or is there? Sometimes I do this. I don't know if you've noticed. Sometimes I start saying, I don't think there's much point in ... And then as I say ... not literally ... but the thing represented by the ... in that time-honoured manner of précising things. By the time I'm halfway through the ... which technically would involve being at the second dot, by the time I get to the second dot of the ... I find myself thinking, actually, maybe that is quite a good question to ask. Because you know the problem with thresholds, don't you? There's always going to be somebody that's a penny above it and somebody else, quite possibly over the road or living next door, who's a penny below it. And that's why they are a blunt instrument. So 11.5 grand as a threshold means that some people will be 1p over it and some people will be 1p under it. And if you're 1p over it, you will find the existence of the threshold quite criminally unfair. And yet if you're 1p under it, you don't need it any more or less than the person who's 1p over it, because there's only 2p of difference between your relative incomes. But it does look to me to be something of a millstone. A lot of people who have been quoted in various media have described how it comes up on the doorstep all the time. An actual cabinet minister has told The Guardian, and I quote, "Winter fuel will lose us the next election. It was a terrible mistake." But they also add, it's probably too late for a U-turn now. I'm interested today in what you think. Actually, that's good. Chris goes to the top of the class. Joke of the day so far is Chris. He says, is today's show in Morse code? Do you get it? ... .. Not so far, no. But you never know. Chris, stay tuned. I'm interested in a traditional political phone-in about how big a mistake this is. I think it is beyond debate that it's a mistake, isn't it? Whatever the reasons for the mistake may be, a mistake it most certainly is. Challenge that. That's your first challenge. 0345 6060 Remind me why it isn't. Remind me why it's perfectly reasonable to expect the oldest and often most vulnerable members of our society to get by on £11,501 a year. I'm not sure it is. A second question, this was the ... one that I was in the process of talking myself out of when I talked myself into it again by the time I got to the second dot. Where would you put it? I mean, who the hell knows what a suitable threshold will be? I'll tell you something for nothing. None of the people who are paid to pontificate upon matters political have got the first idea what it would be like to get by on £11,500 a year. I mean, literally no idea whatsoever. Some of them, I say some of them, some of us, I've got to be honest about this, would probably struggle to get by on £11,500 a month, never mind a year. So there is something really quite bizarre, and there always has been. There's nothing new about this. About the gulf between the commentariat, the chattering classes, the political establishment. I think Farage gets more money just from his gold bullion deals, his gold bullion promotions than the average pensioner is expected to live on in a year. But it doesn't change the fact that imposing the winter fuel allowance in the way that it's been imposed feels wrong. How big a deal is it? Is this cabinet minister right? Do you think this is an actual election loser? 0345 6060 Where would we put the threshold? Who even knows how feasible it is to have it graded or graduated, to have a kind of sliding scale so that you don't have this brutal guillotine above which 1 pence you don't get it, below which 1 pence you do get it. 0345 6060 Dozens of MPs equally concerned about the imminent welfare cuts, asking the Prime Minister to pause them until after the summer when we'll know more about the Back to Work programme investments. But charities absolutely terrified by this, terrified by some of these cuts. And the rationale behind it looks ever weaker, doesn't it? The rationale behind it looks ever weaker because I had two theories at the outset. The first theory was if they can ask the pensioners to do their bit, they can ask all of us. But they still seem fairly minded not to increase income tax, which for the record I think they should do. I think I should pay more tax. Don't waste 10p telling me that I'm free to make a voluntary contribution to the inland revenue. The reason why I think I should pay more tax is because if everybody who earns what I earned paid more tax, it would make a meaningful difference to the economy. If I made an individual voluntary donation, it would not. So that's why we have tax and not just a collection plate that's passed around the country every Sunday after Mass. So please don't. It's only 10:13 on Monday. I haven't had the heating on in Idiot's Corner. It's freezing cold. I don't know whether or not anyone's cleaned it since last Friday. The toilet was out of order last time I checked. So don't send me a message saying, why don't you make a voluntary contribution? Because I'd have to send you to Idiot's Corner. And as I say, it's a cruel and unusual place at the moment. So we've got problem number one, or rationale number one. If you get the pensioners to do their bit, then everybody else can as well. I've seen another story around this morning not from a sort of Tufton Street outfit, but from a reputable and respectable research group talking about how the non-dom taxation may backfire. So you can't tax the rich because they'll leave the country. You can't tax the pensioners because they can't afford it or it's too blunt. Who the hell can you? Where are you going to raise money from? Who looks around this country, apart from reform, and thinks we've got to make cuts? We've got to have less public spending in this country. Listen to the NHS story today. Look at that. Oh, it's Tuesday. It's Tuesday, not Monday. I do that quite often when I've had a bank holiday. Do you? I shouldn't really have known. It's not like Songs of Praise and the Antiques Roadshow were on last night. I should have reset my internal calendar. But the idea that the government doesn't need to spend is absurd. In fact, regardless of what we think about individual issues, increasing public spending is probably the only chance they've got of winning the next election. But where the hell they're going to get the money from is becoming an ever more urgent mystery. They've focused on two or three things: the winter fuel allowance, some welfare cuts, a non-dom penalty, or rather just a non-dom rule, the farm tax, the family farm tax. I saw a few posters at the weekend in the same sort of fields where you used to have the Brexit posters condemning the family farm tax. If I was Labour, I don't think this one is hurting them much. I'd just point out it's half of the family firm tax. So it sounds like an agreeable alliteration, family farm tax, but the family firm tax is roughly half, is double what the family farm tax is. So that one doesn't hurt. But wherever they decide to raise the money, somebody gets upset. If you're on the right, you get upset with them trying to raise money from the wealthy. If you're on the left, you get upset with them trying to raise money from the vulnerable, from the poor, from the people in recipient of state support. And can you raise enough money from there, from either of those parties, to actually make a meaningful difference? And then, of course, you can stand up and say, stop spending money on immigrants. But then you have to close your eyes, put your fingers in your ears, and completely ignore the fact that, whether you like it or not, immigration is a net contributor to our GDP. It actually brings more into our economy than is taken out. I compare immigrants to pensioners in the year to year rather than in the sort of 40, 50-year retrospective analysis, and you're comparing chalk to cheese. So again, there are people out there who will stand up and say, we can save all the money we need by stopping immigration, but they will increase inflation and reduce public spending. That's part of the bind that Keir Starmer finds himself in. So he can't get money from the rich. He shouldn't be taking money from the pensioners. He shouldn't be taking money off the poor or the vulnerable. He shouldn't, if you're right wing, be taking money off the farmers. You can make a pointless argument about immigration, but it completely ignores economic reality and would in fact do the opposite of what is delivered. That's the fascinating thing about the results last week, is that so many of the people who've gone reform also voted for Brexit and Boris Johnson. There should be a word for that, right? Third time lucky is a bit generous. It's more as if I just smash my head against that brick wall one more time, it will be the brick wall that breaks and not my cranium. Quite incredible. Let's just do it again. Let's do it again. Let's trust the people that told us Brexit would be brilliant, make us all rich, and that Boris Johnson was going to be the best Prime Minister since Churchill. Let's trust them. They've got our best interests at heart. They've got a great track record. Their CVs are positively dripping with evidence of their acumen and insight. But here we are. Who can tell me what the Labour Party should do with regard to the winter fuel allowance? And I don't normally like nebulous questions. But how big a problem is this? And who is qualified to answer? If you've been out on doorsteps, how big a problem is this? How big a millstone? You've got an actual cabinet minister who is saying it's a disaster, but it's probably too late to change. Then the question becomes twofold, really, doesn't it? How big a problem? And would changing it work? Or would it just make them look weak?